Every section of river has its own little story to tell. This is a wild river. It's a very dynamic river. The scale of this is just mind-boggling.
It's the longest free-flowing river in the lower 48 United States, and it still represents what a wild river should look like.
When we came, we were going to tame it. We're going to manage this river. But you get reminded of who's boss. The spirit of the river will take control. It's the mighty Yellowstone. It's a love story. When we first came out here, the excitement of owning a piece of property on the river was beyond anything that I could imagine. This was a dream come true. It's a small place by Montana standards, about 300 acres, but half of that is irrigated. The other half is natural river bottom. When we came, we were going to tame it. We're going to manage this river. But as you learn more, you start getting your own land ethic of what's important to you and what's important as the land into the future. Living here every day and experiencing the river every day, you start getting more of a feeling like this is so much bigger than me. There's so much more going on here that is so out of my control.
And when you embrace that notion, it's not about control, but it's about respect. You can really start to appreciate the Yellowstone River for what it is, the lifeblood of this land.
Fishing's just a way to dial up Mother Nature. I'm not just a visitor on the river, I'm part of the river. When you're standing there and you make a connection with a fish, it's just a whole different relationship. It's being part of the system rather than just a casual observer. Among all the rivers in Montana that I love to play on and work on, the Yellowstone is more like an old friend or a family member or an ever-present relative that I just can't shake. It's been such an ever-present part of my life that I can't really necessarily separate myself from this river. Oh, absolutely, the river has shaped me. Through my work as a fisheries biologist, it kind of opened up the river to a whole different level. It was like opening a book that sat on your shelf for 10 years that you've never opened, and then when you do, you go, oh my God, this is awesome. So I think a common misperception about rivers is it's just water flowing through a channel, when in reality a river integrates everything from the uplands all the way into the groundwater. It's a complex system that relies on all sorts of different things all at once. I think about the river and I worry about the river in ways that I don't with other rivers. The Yellowstone is among the healthiest rivers, but it isn't immune to threats. I think the biggest threat is the human tendency to try and control. And control means preventing it from serving its wild nature, armoring banks to prevent it from migrating back and forth across its floodplain. Without that variability, that wildness and calmness interspersed over time, the river can't really breathe and it can't really function in the long term. When you're fly fishing, you have to learn something about the river to do it right. It ties you in closer to that river, pulls you in close, and makes you part of it. You can't just separate the water from the channel, and you can't separate the channel from the banks, and you can't separate the banks from the uplands. It's all one picture.
The scale of this is just mind-boggling, and I've been fortunate to see a lot of this river by boat, by foot. Every single section of it is just spectacular in its own way, it really is. The Yellowstone has shaped me in many ways. I've worked in this applied science working on rivers for almost 3 decades. I definitely feel something with this river, partly because I've just studied it forever. So I love telling the story. I really do. And this is one of the most intact cottonwood river corridors in the western U.S. Cottonwoods go to seed in the springtime when the water's high. Seeds will drop out on open gravel bars. If the rivers don't move laterally and create those open bars, there's really nowhere for these cottonwoods. They need those open bar areas, and those are created when rivers erode and deposit, and they erode and they deposit. So you have this turnover that's always creating new habitats. So we have a long-term sustainable forest, and you can imagine the bird population. You see lots and lots of elk in the fall. The bear population, you know, they will go up and down the river corridors. So it does come back to the whole fact that rivers are dynamics and they're creating habitats. I definitely come from the perspective that a wild river is a river that's not tamed. We put a lot of energy and a lot of money into taming our rivers, and it's very understandable because the dynamics of a wild river really conflict with a lot of land uses. The key is to find that balance, and I think that's really what's happening on the Yellowstone is we have economies down here in the river bottoms that are really important, but we also have a wild river. The work that Mars is doing on the channel migration easements is one avenue that's being taken to try and see if we could find properties and landowners who would be interested in dedicating that ground to be river bottom. That's not to say they can't use the land. The idea is that the river marches over and starts to erode that land, they won't stop it. It's potentially a national model for trying to strike that balance between a tame and a wild river.
Still have some rough edges around it. That's a good find. That thing was buried in the dirt and you found it. So we talk about what's important down the road. This is important down the road. She'll be asked about this 30 or 40 years from now and going, this is what I got to do with my papa. Doing what we can do to preserve it, keep it dynamic, keep it healthy. We can all play our part. This is a bigger picture, like a way bigger picture. And the picture's better with you standing in here, isn't it? Yes, ma'am.
It's December. I look at this river icing up, changing yet again, and I think about the journey that I've had with it over the past year. And I always realize how lucky I am to be a part of its wild nature. And I think I may be only one person, but when the ice is gone, and the cottonwoods start greening up in the spring, and the cycle starts again, I can feel good knowing that I've done something right for this stretch of river that will help it run free forever.